I am Vernon Wilkins, the Carrot Cake Man. Started with a church building fund. In my young life, I always had a job since I was 9. I sold water ice and I always had a job. Worked at Strawbridge Enclosure as an assistant buyer, fashion coordinator in Center City, a manager in South Philly. Never baked a thing. Okay, we did a church building fund. One of my siblings and I used carrot cake, a recipe, I don't know where she got it from, to make carrot cake and raise money for the building fund. Okay, so we had pledged, I think it was like $200 or something. So we made this carrot cake and I'm out selling it, wherever I can. And after the building fund, I was in between jobs. I had this recipe for carrot cake. I had $15 between me and no rent and everything. So I said, let me go to the store. It worked before. Let me go to the store and get some carrot cake basics and bake carrot cake. Went to the supermarket, bought ingredients, came back to my apartment, baked carrot cake, and walked the street and sold it. I used to walk from Haverford Avenue and on the north side of West Philly, down 52nd Street, and back, more or less. But in that walk, I could sell carrot cakes. And people, I would say, I was carrot cake man. People, they were skeptical at first, but then they found out how delicious it is. So I had no problem, walking the street, selling enough cake, at least just to pay my basic bills. So I did that for 3 years. A friend of mine, Samuel Lewis from West Philly, he had a shop on 47th Street called Cookies and Cream. And it was an ice cream shop, and he made fresh cookies. He worked for Amtrak. Okay, he had the store with a lease and couldn't finish the lease. So he had told me about the shop a year before I actually went and looked at it, because I didn't, in my mind, where it was at was different than what I thought. When I finally saw the shop, it was perfect. Little tiny shop, big glass window on 47th Street. It had a countertop, a freezer, and an oven in the wall, and a cash register. That was it. I walked in, turned the oven on, started baking carrot cake, and I would stand outside and watch the window. People would walk by, say, what are you doing in there? I said, carrot cake, go in and have a sample. And that's where free samples started, which lasted 27 years. I gave away free samples. You didn't have to buy it, come in and taste it. You were like mine forever. So that was a basic, even up until, always gave away free samples. I was between 2 elementary schools, St. Francis de Sales and Lee. Every day I had 100 children for a free sample. I was just a little piece of carrot cake on a toothpick. They would come in, line up like soldiers. There's no problems at all. And if their parents tried to walk past the store, they had to stop and get their sample. That was a lot of fun. So I had a lot of fun with the kids. Even now, they bring their children to me and say, that's the man Grandma was telling you, Mom was telling you about. So it's been a really good experience with the public, the carrot cake business. I got everybody from children, little babies to 99-year-olders, so. It started in about 1976 or 7, something like that. Because I got Best of Philly in 1980, the first one. And I got Best of Philly 5 times. Nobody got 5. Restaurant, hotel, chef. Jokingly, they wouldn't leave me alone, but thank God, Then after, in 2006, I got the 5th Best of Philly. And then I think in 2009, they put me in the magazine again. That's one of the most 10 sought after bakers in Philly. So I've always had a lot of press. Front page of the Sunday Philadelphia Inquirer, Elaine Tate as a critic. She could destroy a place. And I met her at an interview on the radio with Stanley Green. Stanley Green, I think he was on WHAT or something. He had this show 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. You know, I trudged there on about a foot of snow. And he told me, that was about maybe the second or third time I had been on the radio with him in the morning. But he told me this time, he says, Vernon, make a little round cake and bring it with you. So I made this little round cake and brought it. And who should walk in there? I didn't know her. The lady walks in with her husband, and it's Joe Coffee there. I think it was like back in the day before coffee was big. You know what I mean? And Joe Coffee was there. It was a man selling lobsters and me. So that was a breakfast, lobster, carrot cake, and coffee. You know what I mean? But anyway, when she came in and she sat down and talked and like, you know, I didn't know who she was. I didn't know that was Elaine Tate. You know what I mean? So, but she was very, very nice, and her and her husband were beautiful people, and we just talked. And so Stanley says, well, we have a cake for you because it's your birthday. And I didn't know it was her birthday, none of that. Okay, so she took the cake was for her, Elaine Tate. Well, about a month later, it was an article in the Inquirer that reads like a novel. It's so beautifully written, and it was written, about me at the front page, and then the second page. This interview has talked about the day, how her and her husband started out, where they live and got there, and everything that happened, during the interview. I lived at 50th and Walton Avenue. The store was at 47th between Cedar and Baltimore. It was in the original shop. It was in the middle of the block. And we were there 3 years. Then the landlord started renovating, and we moved to the corner. So we were on the corner after that. And we were we were there 17 years. I mean, I was there 17 years. And then in 1996, I gave the shop to my sister. And I went to the main line. I was out in Wayne at the Lancaster County Farmers Market. Okay, and I was there 10 years. That was kind of crazy. It was like almost to the day. Like, you come April 7th, you leave April 7th, like 10 years later. It was like one of them kind of things. But I enjoy being out there. Again, a whole different class, economic level of clientele. They loved my cake. Again, their kids would not pass the counter. I was the only vocal one in the market. When you walked in the farmer's market, you would hear me say, free samples, best of Philly carrot cake. And I had to say it. It was like one of them people would walk by and go, and I had to say. So that was like real fun. And again, the children loved the cake. So I did very well in Wayne. Okay. It was at D'Innocenzo's Bakery. I only had a little counter space. It wasn't like I had I just had a 4-foot counter. That was it in the whole bakery. And I didn't bake anything there. I brought my product from Philly there. You know what I mean? But I would stand there and I would sell, give out free samples. Yes, because in 2006, but I didn't come back in a retail store. I came back supplying stores. So I became a supplier. Let me tell you, there was an article done in the Daily News. I got a lot of press, okay? And I never read it because of the headline. Okay, a young lady had written this article. She was like in her early 20s, and she was working for the Daily News, and she was all hype. And she did this, the headline says, Carrot Cake Man makes killing off of SEPTA. I never did that. SEPTA, I never had a car. And saying if they lived in New York back in the day, they would have seen a whole lot of merchandise going on public transit, on the streets, moving from place to place. And that's what I did. I was supplying West Philly and lived in Mount Airy. So I had to get on the bus and take the product to West Philly. Now, in the meantime, I'd be trying to not be seen, but people would want to buy the cake. So I wasn't like I ever solicited on SEPTA. I never said, Carrot Cake Man, come and get your cake. No, I was on my way to West Philly. One time I got to West Philly and had 7 cakes left out of about 100. But that only happened one time. I don't know what that situation was, but it wasn't like I was standing there selling cake. I was moving. Just like even in this article in the Daily News, the chief of police of SEPTA Police told the men that if they see me, to arrest me. Okay, and at this meeting, they told me about 6 or 7 police stood up and said, he never stops. He's not soliciting. You know what I mean? He's on his way somewhere. We never had to, you know what I mean? If you don't say something to him, he's gone. And that's the way I was, okay? So that whole article, I mean, it might have been a nice article. I couldn't read it for the headline. You know what I mean? It was just a lie. You know what I mean? Because I wasn't making no killing off of SEPTA. Well, actually, I was born in North Philly. Okay, I remember my earliest memories is 23rd and Diamond. My parents had a house. Then they moved to 55th and Walton Avenue. Okay, and we were there over 20 years. Okay, 6 sisters, 5 brothers. Now, if you go to that block right now, that house is missing. Can you imagine all them people living in one little row? But we were there for 20 years. You know, my father, you know, we were living there for 20 years. I always had a job. And then I got an apartment in Mount Airy, okay, on, I think it was like Gilbert and Mount Pleasant. A house. I moved into a house with a friend of mine. That's what it was, an apartment. I only lived there a couple years. And then I moved back to West Philly. I had a house on Walton Avenue for about 15 years. Okay, and then I moved back to Mount Airy about maybe 9 or 10 years ago. So that's why. I like Mount Airy, but I love University. There's no place like University City, period. I don't care what they come up with, any neighborhood, I don't care where. There's no place, especially back in the day when people were just, there's a mural at 47th in Baltimore. All of them people are real. All them people interacted with each other daily. Everybody was friendly. You could learn so much stuff about different cultures and people. It was just wonderful. And you know what I mean? And trees. University City is almost like a garden community. You know what I mean? Beautiful homes. You know what I mean? What more do you want out of a neighborhood? Good people, good homes, perfect public transportation. I just loved it. Only because it was a building fund project. I had never baked anything before. I mean, as far as commercial. I was in a model in my 20s, Philadelphia Models Workshop under Wallace Graves. I was a fashion coordinator in Center City at 11th and Market. Before that, I had worked at Strawberry and Closey as an assistant buyer, but I thought I was going into fashion. I thought I was going to be fashion. You know what I mean? But I baked one thing, became Best of Philly, so the fashion went out the window. I always wore a hat because my father wore a hat, and all his uncles and cousins wore hats. When I was a little boy, we would go to family reunion, and of course, the women were in the kitchen. You didn't bother them. The men were outside under a tree, standing with their hats full like this, talking. So the kids didn't bother them either. Back in the day, you respect. But that was a memory of all the men in my father's side of the family wore hats. You know what I mean? I have 5 brothers. None of them wear hats. Well, I really have more than 5. But I have 6 brothers. Okay, but none of them wore hats. But I just put the hat on. I liked it, and people began to recognize me by the hat. Like even right now, if I take the hat, I'll tell people if I want to disappear, I just take the hat off. Yeah, but different trades through the years, but this has been the one forever. I just put the cake on it and deliver. Or now I'm delivering boxes and stuff like that too, and packages, But the tray was important. People, if I walk the street and they see the tray or the hat, they'll almost crash the car. I think in any household, the most important thing is parents. Parents. My parents were beyond. And it got to the point where as I got older, I thought everybody had wonderful parents. All the kids, and I would say things, they'd go, oh, stop. No. They would despair. about family, and it was like not a thing that I ever experienced. Even when I had the shop one time, this little girl, she was very cute little girl, used to come by every day and get a sample. So one day she walks in and she got tears in her eyes, and I said, "Oh, sweetheart, what's wrong? What's the matter?" She says, the boys keep teasing me. She was real cute. You know what I mean? She said, the boys keep teasing me. I said, you go home and tell your father and he'll take care of it. She says, I don't have a father. And that, it was a reality. And I'm old now. I'm like in my late 20s, but I had this delusion of every child having a wonderful parent. I don't know why. I never considered it. You know what I mean? My father would, I always tell people my father would die for us. We were never, 11, 12 children at a time, we were never hungry, naked, none of that. He made sure he would get up early in the morning if he had to and work before he went to work. You know what I mean? He would go out on Sunday morning and we would wake up to the biggest breakfast in the world. He would cook too. You know what I mean? He could cook as good as my mom. You know what I mean? But, I'm growing up in that environment. That was in West Philly. Okay, small, tiny house, about as wide as this, maybe a little bit longer. Okay, but we lived in that house. You know what I mean, on Walton Avenue, and we had a good life. I mean, I had a good childhood. Of course, a small block has about 50 houses. Everybody knew everybody. I took my neighbor back next door here about a month ago. I said, Miss Doreen, I'm gonna take you back 30 years. She said, what? I said, do you have any cinnamon? Because I ran out of cinnamon. But back in the day, across the street, Miss McLean would come for sugar and somebody would borrow flour. My mom would borrow some oil and that's the way the block went. Everybody worked with each other. Everybody knew each other. You know what I mean? My parents were theologians, so they would come for prayer. You know what I mean? All that was the way it was back in the day. Everybody knew everybody. You knew everybody by their first and last name and this and that and the other. You know what I mean? It was like a fun little block to live. Now, another thing that happened on our block in West Philly that I'm sure didn't happen anywhere else in West Philly, 55th and Walton Avenue. We were African American. To our right, the Gearmans. They were German. To our left, Yetta Schulman. That's the biggest war in the world. Neighbors, loving neighbors. To the right of them were the Finneys. They were Irish. To the right of the Germans were the Francises. They were African. Then the O'Kellys, of course, they're Irish. The Mitchells, blacks from North Carolina. Okay, that's the way the block went. My mother's favorite girlfriend was Marianne Arkelian. She was Armenian. Okay, we had a man we called Mr. Pete. We don't know whether he was Japanese, Chinese, whatever. But he was, Asian, and we called him Mr. Pete. We never knew his name, but he would answer. But that's the way the block went. Every holiday, we would have foods and treats from all over the world. It was a wonderful little block. Even certain things that I ate as a child, it took me going to the main line in a full bakery to know what it was we had, you know what I mean? Because the bakery had everything. So I could see things that I had as a child that I hadn't seen or tasted, you know what I mean? So that was a good experience. But and that was the block we grew up on, and it's a wonderful place. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody was in everybody's business, more or less, and then not in everybody's business. But it was a fun. We played ball in the street every day, and everybody trusted everybody. Especially, my father was like one of those loving. I always tell people at my stepmother's funeral, which was wild because he remarried and I have 20 legal brothers and sisters. Okay, but at my stepmother's funeral, they called all the 20 children up to the front of the church and passed the mic. It was the most wonderful 3-hour experience I ever had in my life. And people sat and listened. But it was amazing how one person affects 20 people and totally different. I didn't even know they had that relationship with her. Or they didn't know that I had this relationship, with the stepmom. You know what I mean? That didn't matter to us. The stepmom was mom. It wasn't like it was a separation of command or love. You know what I mean? I don't understand that either when somebody, a whole lot I don't understand because I'm sort of naive about a lot of stuff. But family is family. You know what I mean? My mother and father never argued in front of us. And if they did, it was like, honey, this can't happen. But sweetheart, we have to go here. But baby, you have to. That was crazy. We laugh about that now, how they used to argue in front of us. You know what I mean? It was always sweethearts and babies and loving. But it was serious subjects, but they knew not to, put that on us in a sense. You know what I mean? So. There's no such thing as back in the day, you didn't hang out. Your mother knew where you was at 100% of the time. Relatives we didn't go to. It's a whole lot of relatives we never visited. And I used to always wonder that when I was young, but it was influence. I remember going to a family reunion and being pulled out of a room, where grown-ups were doing I don't know what they were doing, because we weren't allowed to, we weren't influenced. Our parents watched over us. And there was no internet, so we couldn't get any more information than they knew, okay? And dinner table was, sitting around and you talked at the dinner table. So they knew everything. They knew who your friends were. They had to know your friends' parents. It wasn't this going out. We didn't hang on no corners. It wasn't a thing. As a 14-year-old, I better be home by 10 o'clock. For real. It wasn't no hanging out late, and that's the problem now. Internet, 24 hours, out in the street, plans parents don't know about. They don't know nothing about what their kids are doing, where they're at, who they're talking to, the influences they have. And back in the day, our parents knew. They took us to the movies, so they knew what we were looking at. It wasn't like we could watch something on some little small screen somewhere and be influenced by it. So it was sort of like we were raised. That's what's not happening anymore. We grew up in the Holiness Church. There was a whole lot of no's, and that was one of them. If you went to the movie, you sort of sneaked to the movie. Because and even television. We didn't have a television until I was about 12. For real. You might say, well, what did you do? We did a whole lot of things. Played ball, went to the park. Sherwood Playground was there. We did physical things. We had sit-up contests, push-up contests, baseball in the street, half ball in the corner with the stick and half of tennis ball. We had plenty of physical exercise. Now they got strong thumbs and swipe finger. For real. But we did physical exercise, okay? And that's the difference, okay, between now and then. That's a whole lot of differences, and I'm not against technology or progress. But, I'm glad I grew up when I grew up. I always tell people that. They say, oh, you're old man. I said, look, I'm so glad I grew up in this space of time with things that changed, like even from the civil rights movement, all of that in my lifetime, from feeling like, from Martin Luther King to Obama as president. You don't know what that does to a person. What that means. Not that he had to be, and then people say, well, why is he president? It didn't happen. It didn't have to happen. All you need is a symbol. All you need is a focal point and then everything goes from there. So he don't have to be president for 8 years. He just had to make it once. From my point of view. From my point of view. And I think that for a lot of people, that was a significant and major event that we never thought would happen in our lifetime. I was working at Strawberries and Clothier, and I went from the stockroom to assistant buyer. I met Wallace Graves. I had known Wallace Graves, but I didn't know what he did. And so he invited me to this group they had. It was in West Philly, and it was called the Philadelphia Models Workshop. We met once a week on a Monday night, and you paid $2. Okay, so every Monday we had to have $2 to come to this meeting, Philadelphia Models Workshop. Now, they taught runway modeling, photography, hygiene, all kinds of makeup, skincare. So you learned all these things in the workshops every week. Okay, and then occasionally somebody would come to Philly and they would do a show and needed models. So we were very inexpensive models to have, you know what I mean? So we got to go to a lot of shows and with different people and do, you know, different ones a model this time and the next one's a model the next time. And they made me the chairman of the board of directors. I don't know. I mean, I know now as I'm older why, but then I didn't understand it. Why are they making me? Because as a model, now let me tell you, my confidence wasn't, I thought everybody looked better than me, for real. I thought I could see the beauty in every model. I knew what they, you know what I mean? So, and I thought that I was, you know, but apparently, you know, they thought differently. And I was very modest, very humble, so I wasn't aggressive. You know, I mean, knowledgeably. And now that I look back, I know that I was a tiger. But, you know, it wasn't in my consciousness, you know what I mean, to be aggressive and overly forward and all that. I was always, you know. But the workshop, every Monday we would meet and we'd do these shows, okay? And we made the front page of the Tribune once. I still have that photo. Well, I don't have the photo. I have a copy of the photo. In my memorabilia stuff, but we made the front page of the Philadelphia Tribune, and that was like interesting. You know, I mean, that sort of opened us up to different other, you know, people that didn't know what we were doing. Two weeks to Gimbals, because I never was without work. I had a job in South Philly coming up, and it was 2 weeks between Strawbridge and Clothier and my management job in South Philly. I went and applied at Gimbals. I told them I only needed a job for 2 weeks. It was during the summer when they were like, you know, short on staff. So I had a job for 2 weeks at Gimbals, okay, in between jobs. Always worked. You know, my father had a work ethic, and that was like, okay, again, the father don't work, the son ain't gonna work. You know what I mean? And that's the problem. That's the problem. My father worked, you know what I mean? Snow, sleet, hail, heat. He would get up. I mean, he had a job, and I'm telling you, but if we got 12 children, you need more than a job. And he could fix anything. He could fix anything, your car, your house, your stove, your heater, whatever. He could fix anything, okay? And he was the type of person that if it snowed, we lived about 8 houses up in the block, he would shovel the whole. That was the kind of person he was. Then I started to say this at my stepmother's funeral. That was the one thing I said, the first thing I said. I have never met a man happier than my father. And they say, oh, he had 12 children, how can he be? I'm telling you, my father was the happiest man I've ever met in my life. He was happy he was happy for us, happy for everything. Grateful to God for every and he would sing, whistle. We'd be in the street playing, you can hear him praying. You know what I mean? That was my father. You know what I mean? Everybody loved him. He was a really, really, I'm glad I had him. You know what I mean? You can't pick your parents, but. Actually, I didn't plan none of it. You know how people have a plan and they're gonna go to school and they're gonna do this and they're gonna be that. I didn't have a plan. So, but I was always open and, you know, always open for new things and trying different things. And like modeling, you know, you think about it as a child or, you know, growing up, I'll never be a model, that kind of thing. But then I joined this workshop. So I never planned. Okay, even it wasn't my plan to be in business per se. I didn't plan to bake carrot cake. I didn't plan bake anything, to tell you the truth. You know what I mean? But so it happened. I don't know how, it just happened. I think that if you have a positive attitude toward life and go forward, positive, people are attracted to you and you're attracted to certain people and they carry you on and encourage you on, and you know what I mean? So I was always encouraged. My parents, number one, 6 sisters and 5 brothers. All of us are successful in our own. That's crazy. My mother had 6th grade education. My father had 3rd grade education. Another fallacy. That you have to have education in order to raise your kids. You have to have this and that and the other and all this in place and all that. They didn't have none of that. All of us are successful. All 12. Nobody fell by the wayside. Nobody went to prison. Not for real. All of us are successful in our own thing. And my mother raised us like that as individuals. I don't know how she did that. I always said, sometimes when we get together, and I would say, Mom used to cook my favorite food all the time. Now, how's that with 12 children? You know what I mean? But she knew how to, I don't know whether it's that we just loved her food, but I had my favorites, and I got my favorites, enough times to say that she always cooked my favorite food. You know what I mean? Until I can't make cake anymore, I love it. People love me for it. What more do you want out of life? You know what I mean? Everywhere I go, if I go downtown, if I get on the bus, get on the train, anywhere, everywhere, people, hey, carrot cake man, 12 o'clock at night, 2 in the morning, 6 in the afternoon. You know what I mean? And it's not, and I think, well, I always call it like casual fame. It's like, it's not something that I, poke my chest out about, and I'm this and that. A lot of people say, well, you should charge this, and you can charge that, and you can, that's not what it's about for me. You know what I mean? I make a product that people love. You know what I mean? And that's a good feeling. You know what I mean? What more do you want out of life? To do something that people generally love, people, just in general. You know what I mean? No matter what nationality, economic level, doesn't matter. You have a product that people love, and people love me for it. You know what I mean? Well, it started, I had a friend that was an artist. Okay, I met him when I was living on Haverford Avenue on the north side. He worked in the laundromat. And then when I went to the laundromat, and the first impression was, this man don't belong behind the glass. I mean, it was like, his personality was like not laundromat. You know what I mean? And he was like in between like artists and starving artists. He was just working to get money. And so I spoke to him, and we started talking, and we became good friends. Well, he was an artist, and he was a painter. He did painting. Okay, his name was Gary Moore. He eventually ended up in Miami and did a major project in Overtown. It was like 4 blocks of a terrazzo walkway. It had a theme, and he did it all in terrazzo, and was the major center point of the convention center one summer. When they had the convention center and had the whatever. His drawings and everything were like, major. But anyway, by knowing him, his mentor was Deryl Makie. Okay, so after about, let's say 5 or 6 years, Gary moved to Miami. And so me and Deryl were friends, you know what I mean? And I had a shop, he would come by, and he was always, again, artist selling work. You know what I mean? He would come by the shop, and I would buy, I loved his work. That's the first thing. Because art has a language, and once you learn the language, you can appreciate. Okay, and then not only that, but it goes beyond that, because once you appreciate art, then you start picking it apart. You see things you never saw before. It's like color, everything. It's just beautiful. I love it. Okay. But anyway, so I would just buy work from him. He would need money, and I was like, and it wasn't expensive. He would come by $40, $20. I would, buy this work from him. Okay. 2 things that it did. It made me a collector of his work, which I still have. But if he had kept it, it probably wouldn't be around. And I think he passed in 2006, Deryl Makie. Okay, but I have a lot of his work because I collected it over the years. And then sometimes I would buy 2 or 3 things, and he would say, you have to have this. He would give me something. As part of, because he would do series of works. Like it would be like a theme to 4 or 5 pieces of work. You know what I mean? So sometimes he would give me a piece. You know what I mean? Or he would be afraid somebody wouldn't appreciate, I don't know. He would give me work sometime. Okay, so I ended up with a huge collection of Deryl Daniel Makie. Behind you is my attempt at artwork. Okay, when I lived in University City, I said, white paper is so intimidating. When you look at a white canvas, it's intimidating. And Deryl had done some things on black paper. And I said, that's a good idea, because instead of trying to create the depth, all you have to do is the surface, because the background is there. You don't have to paint a background. You don't have to, because I would see artists do a whole color of background and then do the work. And I used to wonder why that happened, but that's because you have to have something more than unless you're drawing with pencil, it's better to bring stuff out than create it from the, so I had a basic background. So what I would do is I would put like light color and then a white or beige and then put color on top of it. Acrylics. They're easy because they're like, it's like you can draw with them like crayons with their paint. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I used acrylics and so that was my attempt. But I learned something from that. I had two pieces, like right now, there was two pieces of, when I lived in University City, I put the two black pieces of paper on the wall at the foot of the steps. I would get dressed to go out. And I would come down the steps and say, oh, just let me do this. And I would do one little thing. And next thing I know, it's 2:00 in the morning. And it would be like that kind of thing. And it really taught me what an artist goes through. Because Deryl Makie couldn't stop painting. I used to wonder, well, don't you take a week off, a day, or rest? But it really, once you start, you can't stop until you feel it's finished. That's crazy. You know when it's done. You know when you don't want to put another, and it's not like you know what I mean? But it would end, and it would be so consuming. You know what I mean? And that's what I learned. That taught me like artists, what they go through. You know what I mean? I wasn't a painter, that was just a hobby, but it was draining. You know what I mean? Because you don't realize, you know what I mean? It's just a wonderful experience. You know, I did those two. One is actually a self-portrait because I put a mirror next to the black paper and I actually copied my face. You know what I mean? I don't have hazel eyes, but I put hazel eyes to make it, pop out. Okay? But that's called Silent Descent, the one on the right. And it's like a protest in the streets, but he opened not his mouth. That kind of thing. You know what I mean? That's a scripture. And the other one is from a book. It was a black and white, again, a black and white photo of this woman, just her face. Okay. And so I said, well, this would be easy since I got black paper. It would be easy to draw this woman's face, right? So I'm drawing the face and I did this and did this. And then when I got to her eyes, it frightened me. Okay, I said, something is wrong. Like when I looked at her, I started drawing the eyes, it frightened me. I said, why am I scared? Then I looked at the photograph again, and at the bottom, it's a post-mortem photo. See, back in the day, a lot of people didn't let you take their photograph when they were alive. They figured you captured their spirit or something. You know what I mean? So they would have to wait till they pass and then crop them and take a picture so they could have a memory. And that's what after I had almost did all the rest of it, the figure, when I got to the eyes, then I knew I had to do something to bring this lady alive. So then I went to Africa Adorned, which is another book, and they have all these different jewelries and fabrics and and I made her an African queen. Now, I know she got family somewhere, you know what I mean? Because she was a real person, a real photo, you know what I mean? So I know she got family somewhere, but they don't know she's a queen, you know what I mean? So that was my second project. And then the third one was this one here with it was supposed to be like an island city in the dark. And so I went for the dark colors and, that kind of thing. But that was the being involved in the art world. Then the modeling too. That's art too, performance art. You know what I mean? So that was the art. And I just collected and collected and collected. I have so much artwork, so much, too much. When I was in University City, one time I had Deryl Makie come over because I wanted to know the stories behind the paintings. You know what I mean? And I sat him in the living room. I didn't realize I had 50 pieces in the living room. I mean, like this, but I had 50 just in the living room, going up the steps, in the hallways. All the rooms upstairs had art. The dining room had art. Just like now, everywhere, art. You know what I mean? So I always used to tell people, my house is like a museum. You know what I mean? In a sense, I didn't go for that. That wasn't my thing, but that was how it ended up. You know what I mean? I'd have people come by for a particular, I don't want to say what, they would come by for a particular, purpose and end up in the house looking at art and never even got to the purpose. You know what I mean? And then the next time, bring 3 girlfriends. It was like, So that was like, I had a lot of fun. I just loved University City, probably because I grew up on Walton Avenue and then had the house there. And then the people are so nice. All my neighbors were good neighbors. When I moved, one of my neighbors cried because I didn't tell them I was moving, and I moved out of the house. They saw the truck. He said, what's going on? I said, well, I'm moving, and just one of them just started crying. Because we had really good relationships, our little block, was like, everybody knew everybody. And I insist on being friendly. I don't have no argument with nobody, whatever. That's your life, not my life. So I don't have no argument with nobody. People argue with their neighbors. How do you live next door to somebody and every morning you're looking at them crazy and they looking at you crazy? What is that? That's a whole lot of negative energy. Really, really, really bad for your own soul. I don't care what you're trying to get off. You're destroying your soul. So like my father, I try to be the happiest man in the world. That's what I grew up with. That's how you're supposed to be. That's how you're supposed to live. No argument with neighbors, nothing. My father helped the neighbors. My father would give.